Maybe it would be better if she didn't make it. My brother's voice was low, but the pediatric intensive care unit was so quiet that every word reached me. Mark stood beside my 8-year-old daughter's hospital bed, staring at the oxygen mask covering Lily's face. Less than an hour earlier, doctors had rushed her through those doors after a sudden allergic reaction closed her airway. Now my own brother was suggesting they should let her die. Her mother is poison to this family, he added. Maybe this ends the damage. My aunt lowered her eyes. My cousin gave a slow, uncertain nod. I gripped the doorframe, unable to breathe. Before I could confront them, Dr. Patel stepped between us. Ms. Carter, I need to explain what happens next. He guided me toward the hallway while nurses adjusted Lily's monitors. Mark watched me leave with the calm expression he always wore when he had already convinced everyone that he was right. For months, he had told our relatives I was selfish, unstable, and determined to destroy the family over our late parents' estate. My only offense had been refusing to sign financial documents he kept pushing across my kitchen table. "You're making everyone suffer," he had said. I had stayed silent because silence had always been easier than another family war. After losing my husband, I believed keeping the peace was the safest thing I could do for Lily. Standing outside her hospital room, I finally understood that my silence had given Mark control. Dr. Patel was explaining that Lily's breathing had stabilized when a nurse called out behind us. "She's awake." I rushed back inside. Lily's eyelids fluttered. She looked frightened and exhausted, but then her gaze moved past me and settled on Mark. He stepped closer. "Hey, sweetheart, just rest." Lily pushed herself upright before the nurse could stop her. "Uncle Mark," she whispered. Everyone froze. Her small hand tightened around the blanket. "Should I tell them what you did while Mom was asleep?" The nurse, entering with a medication tray, stopped in her tracks. My relatives turned toward Mark. The color drained from his face, but he quickly forced a smile. "She's confused," he said. "She doesn't know what she's talking about." Lily kept staring at him. And for the first time, Mark looked afraid of an 8-year-old child. Nobody spoke for several long seconds. The heart monitor continued its steady rhythm, while the nurse gently helped Lily lie back against her pillow. "Sweetheart," she said softly, "you need to rest. The doctors are still watching your breathing." Lily nodded, without taking her eyes off Mark. He gave a nervous laugh that sounded forced. "She's been through a terrible scare," he said, looking around at our relatives. "The medication can make children say strange things." Several family members immediately relaxed. That was Mark's gift. He always sounded calm, reasonable, completely certain. People trusted him because he had managed investments for nearly everyone in the family for years. Whenever he spoke, others usually followed. I looked at him, searching for any sign that I'd imagined the fear on his face. I hadn't. It had vanished almost instantly. Dr. Patel stepped into the room. "Only one family member should stay with Lily tonight. Everyone else needs to let her recover." "I'll stay," I said immediately. The doctor nodded. "The rest of you can visit tomorrow." One by one, my relatives began leaving. Most avoided looking at me. Mark paused beside my chair. "You should ignore what she said." "I heard every word you said before that," I answered quietly. His smile faded for only a second. "You're emotional, Naomi. Anyone would be." Then he walked away. The automatic doors closed behind him. For the first time since Lily had collapsed, I felt something worse than fear. I felt that none of this had started today. After Lily finally drifted into a light sleep, I sat beside her bed, listening to the machines breathe with her. My mind kept replaying the last several months. Everything had changed after our parents passed away. Mark had become responsible for organizing paperwork connected to their investment accounts and remaining assets. Every few weeks, he arrived at my house carrying another folder. "I just need one more signature." "Later," I would answer. You don't understand these financial documents. I'll have my own attorney review them first. Each time I refused, he became slightly colder. Soon relatives started calling. Mark says you're delaying the estate. Why are you making everything difficult? Your brother is trying to help everyone. I stopped defending myself because every explanation somehow became more evidence that I was the problem. Even family dinners became uncomfortable. Conversations stopped when I entered. Invitations quietly disappeared. Mark never insulted me directly in front of everyone. He didn't have to. He simply planted doubts and let everyone else finish the work. About 6 weeks earlier, I noticed several bank notices arriving out of order. A folder containing copies of family financial correspondence seemed thinner than I remembered. I searched my house twice before convincing myself I must have misplaced something during another exhausting week of hospital shifts. Working 12-hour nights while raising Lily alone left little energy for investigating missing paperwork. I blamed myself. Looking back, I wondered why. A quiet voice interrupted my thoughts. "Mom." Lily was awake again. I leaned closer. "What do you need, sweetheart?" She looked toward the door before whispering carefully. "Do you still have the blue folder?" I frowned. "What blue folder?" "The one that was in your overnight bag." Every muscle in my body tightened. "I never told you about a blue folder." "I know," Lily answered. "I just wanted to know if he took it." Before I could ask who she meant, someone knocked softly on the partially open door. It was Rachel, one of the senior nurses I had worked beside for years before transferring departments. She stepped inside and lowered her voice. "Naomi, there's something you should probably know." "What is it?" I was reviewing overnight visitor records because of today's incident. She hesitated before continuing. "According to hospital security, someone entered this room very late last night while you were asleep beside Lily." I stared at her. "That's impossible. Visiting hours were over." "I know." She looked toward the hallway to make sure no one else was listening. "And whoever came in stayed long enough to search around the room." My eyes slowly turned back toward Lily. She wasn't looking confused. She wasn't imagining anything. She had seen someone. And suddenly, I understood why my 8-year-old daughter had looked at Mark with fear instead of surprise. Who had entered our hospital room while I slept, and what had Lily witnessed that made my brother afraid of a child's memory? The next morning, the hospital's family consultation room felt more like a courtroom than a place for worried relatives. Mark arrived first, carrying 2 cups of coffee as though nothing unusual had happened. "I'm glad we're all here," he said. "Let's clear up this misunderstanding before it upsets Lily any further." My Aunt Susan folded her arms. "Then explain why she singled you out." Mark sighed dramatically. "She's 8. She nearly died yesterday. Children mix dreams with reality after heavy medication." A few relatives nodded again. I didn't interrupt him. Instead, I turned to the hospital administrator standing near the door. "I'd like security to review everyone who entered Lily's room after visiting hours." Mark looked at me. "Naomi, don't make a scene. I'm asking for hospital records, nothing more." The administrator nodded. "We've already started reviewing electronic visitor logs." A security supervisor entered carrying a tablet. "We can confirm that someone accessed the pediatric ICU after normal visiting hours using an authorized temporary visitor pass." My uncle frowned. "So whose pass was it?" "At the moment, we can't determine that. Several temporary family passes were issued and exchanged throughout the evening." Mark leaned back in his chair. "There you have it." He smiled confidently. Anyone could have gone in. The discussion should have ended there. Instead, Aunt Susan kept staring at him. "You seem awfully relaxed." He chuckled. "Because I know I didn't do anything wrong." She didn't answer, but she didn't look convinced anymore. While security continued checking records, I returned to Lily's room to collect a clean sweater from my overnight bag. The blue folder was still inside. At first glance, nothing seemed unusual. Then I opened it. The papers weren't arranged the way I always kept them. Several pages were upside down. The divider tabs had been moved. One plastic sleeve was empty. I stood perfectly still. I remembered organizing that folder only days earlier, while preparing documents for an attorney to review. Someone had definitely searched through it. Carefully, methodically, without expecting me to notice. Lily watched me from her bed. "I told you. You saw someone touch this." She gave a small nod. I didn't know what he was looking for. Before I could ask another question, Mark walked into the room without knocking. His eyes immediately dropped to the blue folder in my hands. For a split second, all confidence disappeared from his face. Then it returned. "You shouldn't be worrying about paperwork," he said. "Focus on your daughter." "I am." He stepped closer. "Let's leave the hospital. We can settle family business privately after Lily comes home." I closed the folder. "Why are you suddenly so eager to leave?" His jaw tightened. "Because this is embarrassing the family." "No," I replied calmly. "Whatever happened here embarrassed the family." Neither of us moved. The silence between us was broken by a knock at the open door. The same security supervisor looked directly at Mark. "Mr. Carter, we've completed processing the surveillance footage from last night." Every conversation in the hallway stopped. Mark slowly turned toward the supervisor. And for the second time in less than 24 hours, I watched my brother's confidence begin to crack. Nobody spoke as we followed the security supervisor down the hallway. The consultation room was waiting for us again, but this time 2 hospital administrators were already seated inside. A uniformed hospital security officer stood near the television monitor mounted on the wall. Mark remained surprisingly composed. "This is becoming ridiculous," he said. "You're treating me like a criminal because of something an exhausted child said." The administrator answered calmly. "We're simply establishing the facts." I sat beside Lily, who insisted on coming despite the nurses wanting her to stay in bed. Dr. Patel agreed, provided she remained in a wheelchair. The room fell silent. Before anyone reached for the remote control, Lily tugged gently on my sleeve. "Mom." I squeezed her hand. "It's okay, sweetheart." She looked directly at Mark. I wasn't asleep. His eyes narrowed. "What?" "The night before yesterday, I woke up because my throat hurt." Every relative stared at her. "I saw you." Mark laughed nervously. "You dreamed that." She slowly shook her head. "No." Her voice remained soft, but every word landed heavily. "Mom was asleep in the chair. You opened her purse." I felt my heartbeat quicken. "You took out the blue folder." Mark folded his arms. "Lily." "You kept turning the papers." She continued before he could interrupt. "Then you whispered." She closed her eyes for a moment, remembering. "Nobody can ever find the transfer forms if I take them first." The room became perfectly still. Even Mark stopped pretending to smile. The security supervisor quietly picked up the remote. "I believe it's time to view the footage." The video began. The timestamp showed 2:17 a.m. My chair was visible beside Lily's hospital bed. I was asleep, my head resting against the mattress. Lily appeared motionless beneath her blanket. Then the door opened. Mark walked inside alone. No one in the room breathed. He looked over both shoulders before quietly approaching my overnight bag. He removed the blue folder, exactly where Lily had described. For several minutes, he examined document after document. Then he slipped several papers beneath his suit jacket, returned the remaining files to the folder, placed it back into my bag, and walked out without ever checking whether anyone had seen him. The recording ended. The electronic access log immediately appeared on the screen. Visitor credential, Mark Carter. Entry time, 2:17 a.m. Exit time, 2:26 a.m. The security supervisor looked up. The access credential matches the footage. My uncle was the first to speak. Mark. He looked genuinely stunned. What were you doing? Mark cleared his throat. I was looking for insurance paperwork. You hid papers inside your jacket, Aunt Susan said. I was organizing them. No, I answered quietly. You were stealing them. His composure finally disappeared. Naomi, you're making assumptions. I'm making observations. I looked at the screen again. The missing papers. The pressure for my signature. The missing bank notices. The estate documents. They weren't separate problems. They were connected. Mark looked toward the door as though calculating whether he could simply leave. Instead, another knock interrupted everyone. 2 investigators entered the room, accompanied by a representative from the hospital's legal department. One investigator carried a thick evidence folder. Mr. Mark Carter. Yes. We've just received financial records connected to the Carter family investment accounts. He placed the folder carefully on the conference table. I think everyone here needs to see these before anyone leaves. No one moved. Not even Mark. The lead investigator opened the evidence folder and spread several documents across the conference table. Ms. Carter, he said, looking at me, we've been coordinating with the financial institution that manages your late parents' investment accounts. He slid one statement toward me. Do you recognize this signature? I looked down. It looked exactly like mine. But it wasn't. I never signed this. The investigator nodded. That's what we believed. He placed another document beside it. Then another. And another. Every transfer authorization carried a version of my signature. Every transfer moved money from family investment accounts into shell accounts that eventually traced back to Mark. Aunt Susan covered her mouth. Oh, my God. The investigator continued. Mr. Carter accumulated substantial gambling losses over the past year. Rather than disclose those debts, he created accounts using Ms. Carter's personal information and forged documents to authorize multiple unauthorized transfers. The room turned toward Mark. He didn't say a word. The second investigator opened another folder. When Ms. Carter refused to sign additional estate paperwork, Mr. Carter believed she had become suspicious. He pointed toward the paused hospital surveillance image on the screen. That's why he entered the hospital room after visiting ours. He wasn't there to comfort his niece. He was searching for documents that could expose the fraud. I slowly looked at my brother. So every family argument. He lowered his eyes. It was because you were protecting yourself. He remained silent. The stories you told everyone about me. Silence. The reason you convinced them I was tearing the family apart. Still nothing. You wanted them to stop believing me before I even knew the truth. For the first time in years, Mark had no explanation. No polished speech. No careful manipulation. Only silence. Aunt Susan suddenly stood. She looked directly at him. Yesterday. Her voice trembled. You stood beside an 8-year-old little girl, fighting for her life. She struggled to finish. And you said it might be better if she died. No one defended him. Not one relative. My uncle slowly removed a folder of investment paperwork from his briefcase and placed it on the table. You've managed my retirement for 12 years. My cousin quietly added her account documents beside his. So have you. Within moments, several relatives gathered every financial file they had brought with them. The trust that had protected Mark for years disappeared in complete silence. The investigators informed him that the surveillance footage, visitor logs, forged documents, banking records, and recovered transfer information would all become part of the criminal investigation. They asked him to remain available for formal questioning. He finally looked at me. I never wanted this to happen. I met his eyes. You wanted me blamed. You wanted Lily to grow up believing her mother destroyed this family. You just never expected her to remember the truth. He had no answer. A few minutes later, he walked out of the consultation room accompanied by the investigators. None of our relatives followed him. Instead, they slowly turned toward me. Aunt Susan began crying. I'm so sorry. I believed him. So did I, my uncle admitted quietly. We should have asked you. My cousin wiped tears from her face. We judged you without ever listening. I appreciated their honesty, but I couldn't pretend nothing had happened. I forgive those who are truly sorry, I said calmly. But forgiveness doesn't rebuild trust overnight. I spent months standing alone because believing Mark was easier than asking me one question. No one argued, because they knew I was right. Back in Lily's room later that afternoon, the machines sounded far less frightening than they had the day before. She smiled weakly as I tucked her blanket around her. Mom. Yes. I thought maybe everyone would be mad at me. I kissed her forehead. No. You protected us. She looked toward the window. Dad always said the truth protects people. Tears filled my eyes. He was right. Months later, Lily had completely recovered and returned to school with the same bright smile she had before that terrifying night. The criminal investigation continued, and Mark lost his professional license as clients withdrew their accounts and authorities pursued charges for fraud, identity theft, and forgery. Family members worked through legal channels to recover what they had lost. As for me, I finally stopped trying to hold together relationships that existed only because I stayed silent. I ended every financial connection with my extended family, built a smaller circle based on honesty instead of obligation, and focused on raising Lily in a home where peace no longer depended on pretending everything was fine. Looking back, the moment that changed our lives forever wasn't when my brother betrayed us beside a hospital bed. It was when one brave 8-year-old chose the truth over fear. And I will always remember that the strongest person in our family wasn't the one everyone believed. It was the little girl who refused to stay silent when it mattered most.